Gracious, warm, and energetic, we have been very fortunate that Evan Greenspan has been a member of our congregation. He has led the congregation in prayer over the high holidays, and it is now a pleasure to be able to hear him not sing holy words, but to share with us words of Torah as our darshan this Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Let me get situated here. And it's good. It's good morning, and it will still be morning by the time I'm done, I promise you. So first I thank our rabbis and our chazanim, Julie Wynn, who coordinates the speakers here at Adat Ariel, and all of you for the chance to share a few words with you this morning. One of the wonderful things about the Adat community is that they do allow lay people to come up and give the drash on Shabbat. And this is unusual because some rabbis are not so willing to give up their pulpits, so we appreciate that. There's a story of a man who was asked to prepare a drash while the rabbi is away, and he takes this very, very seriously. So he spends 2 weeks going through every book he owns, honing his insights, looking for deep meaning in the Parsha. And the Thursday night before Shabbat, he finally finishes. He closes the book. The family's gone to bed. Everyone's asleep. Here's a voice. Bernie, this is an angel of the Lord. You have done such a good job interpreting my Parsha that the Lord God will give you one wish, any wish you desire. Bernie says, this is amazing. You know what I'd really like? I'd really like a trip to Hawaii. I love Hawaii. In fact, I don't get to go Hawaii that much with the family because I really hate the airport. I hate having to take off your shoes and the body scanner and all that stuff. I would like my own personal bridge out to Hawaii. The voice says, Bernie, this would be a very difficult wish to fulfill. Think of the natural resources and the environmental impact of your wish. Surely you have something less material and something more spiritual. He says, you're right. If I could have anything, I'd really like to understand my wife. I don't know what she really wants. I don't know. She says things, I don't know if she's really saying them. She says she's happy, and then she gives me the silent treatment for 2 hours. I don't understand. Help me understand my wife. Complete silence. The voice comes back. Would you like 2 lanes or 4 lanes on your bridge? Okay. So today's subject is keeping my talit on. It's very serious, very, very serious, especially if you are a child or you act like a child. And that subject is Hanukkah Gelt. Yes. And I'm going to give anyone in this room a chance to win some Hanukkah Geld. I have lots here. This first question is for anybody, young people over there. Oh, she says, bring it on. Good. Okay, name a Jewish holiday that comes every year on the 25th. Oh, wait a minute, I need a volunteer. I need an assistant. Where's my assistant? My assistant, I prearranged an assistant. He's not here. Yoni! Yoni gets paid in advance. Yoni, thank you. Because I would like to throw this, but I have a terrible aim. My arm is not what it used to be. Okay, so name a Jewish holiday that comes on the 25th of Kislev every year. Young person. Okay, Yoni. Hanukkah, very good, not Purim. Today's the 24th of Kislev. 25th of Kislev is tonight. Okay, next young person's question. Young people only. Name the famous band of brothers who are the heroes of the Hanukkah story. Yes! Maccabees is right. You win. Mazel tov. Anybody know what Maccabee means? Hammer. And you know what else? It is an acrostic. Mi kamocha boilim ad Hashem. We read it this morning. Okay, great. Now, this one is for anybody. Everybody knows the story of Pesach is found in the Torah. The story of Purim we read every year from the Megillat Esther. Where in the Bible do we find the story of Hanukkah? You don't! Who said that? He gets some candy. Right, that's right. You can look high and low in the Jewish Bible. You will not find... What? Wait, I thought this was my day to speak. In the Tanakh, which excludes the Apocrypha, he's the rabbi, right? I'm not a rabbi. So let me share this, because most people, he gets gelt later. I got special gelt for him. I got the non-chocolate gelt for him. Okay. In the Jewish Bible, your Tanakh, you will not find anything about Hanukkah. In fact, in all the traditional non-apocryphal sources, we'll get to in a second, the only reference you find is in the Talmud, which is Tractate Shabbat 21b, Rabbi Silver, I think I'm right, which says, Ma Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah? Hanukkah, it mentions it's an 8-day holiday. It commemorates how the Hasmoneans, the Hashmonaim, recaptured the temple from the Syrian Greeks. 1 day of oil miraculously burns for 8 days, and that we celebrate this for 8 days each year, and we read the Hallel. That's it. No Matityahu, no dreidels, no Judah the Maccabee, nothing. So why isn't Hanukkah in our Tanakh? Hanukkah was the last major holiday that was added until we get to the 20th century. And because it's post-biblical, it does not have the same status as Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuot. So like Purim, it came later. And while we can't precisely date the Exodus, we do have a lot of reliable historical information about Hanukkah. So we know it occurred in 165 BCE, before the Common Era. To put that in perspective, Yoni, take a seat, buddy. Thank you. Thank you, Yoni. This is about 400 years after the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, and 300 years after the Purim story. The history of Hanukkah is found in these Jewish books from the Greek and early Roman era that are not part of our Tanakh, and these are the Apocrypha. Thank you, Rabbi. Because around this time, the rabbis considered the Jewish canon closed. So we have lots of literature that was not part of the Tanakh, but it is accurate. Hanukkah is described in these first of these two of these 4 books, which are called Maccabees. And if you look in some Christian Bibles, not all Christian Bibles, you'll see the 4 books of the Maccabees. So that's where most of our story is taken from. In some Sidurim, you'll find something called the Megillat Antiochus, which was also Megillat Hashmonaim, which was written in Aramaic, but it came much, much later. It came 7th century, which is about 800 years after the Hanukkah story. And in fact, in the Renaissance, there are some Italian synagogues that would get up and read Megillat Antiochus, similar to how we read Megillat Esther, and I don't know what the trup was, but I do have a copy of this. So it is now in Hebrew, but it was written in Aramaic, then translated back to Hebrew. So this leads us to the final question. This is for anybody in the room. Category is conquerors of the ancient world. We all know Hanukkah celebrates the victory of a small band of Maccabees over the much larger, more powerful Syrian Greeks. But 200 years prior to all of this, there was a famous Greek who conquered all of the ancient world, from Babylonia all the way down to Egypt, including Judea. And he was the one that first brought Greek culture to this region. Where 2 bags name this great Greek, Alexander the Great. Very good. I knew the history majors would get that one. Okay, yes, he's Alexander the Great, and it was Alexander the Great who conquered the former Babylonian Empire, which had conquered the temple. But what most people don't know is that Alexander was not intolerant of Judaism. So the Jews were not at war with Greek culture right away. In fact, for these 200 years, Greek culture kind of caught on in Judea. Over time, Greek thought started to influence Jewish thought. And over time, Greek fashions, Greek speech, Greek architecture, and Greek athletics began to appear in ancient Israel. You go to Israel today, you'll see some of these Greek buildings. This is because the Greeks had these very powerful and very intelligent ideas, and we still talk about these ideas to this day. Greek concepts like democracy and the Socratic method. This is what underlies the Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment, and then eventually the founding of the United States, the US Constitution, and this whole wave of democracy that happens in the 19th century. But 2,500 years ago, this was all very new and exciting. And these ideas were very attractive to the people of the book, especially a younger generation who defied their elders and daringly began to embrace these very powerful but very non-Jewish ideas. Some things never change. By the time of Antiochus, 200 years after Alexander the Great, Judea was actually very Greek. Historians would later call this gradual transition to Greek ideology Hellenism, or Hellenization. Abram Sachar wrote a landmark book called History of the Jews, and he describes it this way. He says, the Hebrew stressed reliance on an omnipotent God and a divinely sanctioned moral law, while the Greek bowed to no law but that of complete self-expression. Greeks loved beauty, art, the outdoor life, and the wonders of nature. The Greek had a delicate and subtle sense of reason and a keen desire to use it. While the Hebrew believed in the beauty of holiness, the Greek believed in the holiness of beauty. So by the time of Hanukkah, Judea was actually divided between the Hellenists, who they called Leitzim, and the traditionalists who called themselves Hasidim. This morning, we read Parshat Vayeshev, and we were lucky enough in our triennial reading to get this passage I'm going to mention. Vayeshev happens 1,500 years prior to all of this, so it's before the Exodus, it's before Moses. We read of Joseph's incredible trial, being sold as a slave by his own family to a band of Ishmaelites. His price was, anybody know? 20 silver pieces. 20 silver pieces. Get it later. Yeah, it's in the Torah this morning. He gets shipped off to Egypt. And by the way, if you haven't read the rest of this morning's Parsha, you should check it out because it contains some of the raciest and dramatic episodes in all of Torah. You find family rivalries. We have intrigue. We have a murder plot. We have not one but two very explicit sexual episodes. The other one involves Joseph's brother, ironically named Judah. That's the original Judah, who had an interesting story with his daughter-in-law Tamar. And of course, the other involves what we read this morning, Joseph himself. He winds up in Egypt. He's taken into the home of Potiphar. He famously spurns the advances of Potiphar's wife. He winds up being arrested and jailed, accused of committing the very act that he so gallantly eluded. So the question is, what does today's story of Joseph's trials in Egypt have to do with the Maccabees fighting the Hashmonaim? The Maccabees and the Hashmonaim fighting Hellenists and Syrian Greeks all these centuries later. My answer is this. In both stories, we have a central Jewish character who is completely surrounded by the comforts and persuasions of an alien culture. And yet Joseph in Egypt and the Maccabees in occupied Judea choose to remain true to their Jewish values when they really didn't have to. Think about it. Here's Joseph. He's led off in chains to Egypt. He quite understandably would have said, "Where's God? Where's God? God didn't protect me from my brothers. God allowed me to be thrown into a pit. God allowed me to be sold as a slave. I am lucky to survive. Only through my own charm and good looks and talent am I now running this Egyptian dude's house. And now his wife is asking me to dance." As John Quinones would say, what would you do? Potiphar's wife. On page 240, we see Potiphar's wife is repeatedly singing "Voulez-vous coucher avec moi" to Joseph. Joseph has had enough, and he says, "Ve'ech eser hara'ah hagadol hazot v'hatati le'Elohim." How can I do this ra'ah hagedola, this really, really bad thing, and sin before God? So even in these circumstances, he is aware of his higher purpose. He's aware of God. He's aware that while no one is looking, he still thinks of his principles. He knows he was meant to be above this situation. And what's more, he stands up for principles in the face of a very uncertain future. He stood up for his principles, he got landed in jail. He lost his comfortable position in Potiphar's house, but as we'll find out next week, His imprisonment will ultimately lead to a larger plan in which he interprets Pharaoh's dreams. Pharaoh himself, and predicts the famine in Egypt, saves not only Egypt, but saves the future nation of Israel as well. Now, Matidyahu, the priest, knew this story. He knew the story of Joseph, and in his time, there was also seduction going on. Most of the nation had already been seduced by Hellenism. They were living in this thrall of nature and beauty and physical perfection and athletic contests and self-gratification, self-exploration, and very deep intellectual and philosophical ideas. And I say again, isn't this sound so familiar? For 200 years, the Hellenist Leitzim grew further apart from the traditionalist Hasidim, but they coexisted. It took a megalomaniac like Antiochus or Antiochus IV to cross the line. And here's my final question for the day. Does anybody know who coined the phrase, drawing a line in the sand? It's apocryphal. It was Antiochus. Antiochus, in the story of his conquest of Egypt, literally drew a line in the sand. It's described in this episode, it's described, and that's where that phrase comes from. So while Antiochus is out drawing lines in the sand while he's conquering Egypt, the word gets back up to Judea that he is killed. And some of the Jews start celebrating. Problem was this, the rumor was not true. And when Antiochus finds out that these traditionalist Jews who have been giving him a hard time are now celebrating his presumed death, he decides it's time to wipe them out. So he makes a deal with the Leitzim, the Hellenist Jews. He outlaws the teaching of Torah, and this is the story we all know. He outlaws teaching of Torah, observance of Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and Brit Milah. And he decrees that the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, be turned into a temple of Zeus, the hospitable. So now, our intellectually sophisticated but morally bankrupt Greek Empire has done something they've never done before. They are forcing a conquered culture. This was a culture that Alexander himself respected. They're forcing the Jews to abandon their tradition in their own land. Unprecedented. So the line was crossed. And Matidyahu, the priest, like Joseph, stood up for principles of Torah. And like Joseph, he took action, despite a very uncertain outcome. Like Joseph, it cost him his freedom. Matidyahu and the Maccabees had to run to Modin. They had to get out of Jerusalem. And ultimately, we know, they prevailed. They saved the temple, they saved their homeland, but more importantly, they probably saved Judaism. Because if this Antiochus thing had not happened, it's very possible that Hellenism would have infiltrated Jewish culture, just like it did so many other Mesopotamian cultures that are now unheard of. This was the miracle. I think it's a greater miracle that this very morning, in the second decade of the 21st century, we're here. And we are still grappling with our Creator. We are still praying to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and Matidyahu. And every day, our generation has to face its own challenges of seduction. We're seduced in digital perfection. We have gossip, we have provocative ideas being thrown at us every day. And the message that real happiness is just one credit card swipe, or debit or PayPal, away. Today, we live in a world where God and the notion of God is debated as entertainment. Religious practice is a punchline. We have atheist activists who challenge the government to either prove that God is real or stop making references to him because it's offensive to the human rights of atheists. And what's funny about that is the whole idea of human rights was installed by our founders as a divinely given right, not a man-made right. On the other side, we have fundamentalists of certain faiths who are willing to murder themselves and murder other people in some twisted sense of divine righteousness. So it's no wonder that religious affiliation is on the decline in the United States and elsewhere. What can we do? Well, in the conclusion of next week's Haftorah, which is a special Haftorah for Hanukkah, we read a famous line. Prophet Zechariah says, Lo v'chayil v'lo v'choach im ruchi amar ad Hashem. Not by might and not by power, but by my spirit, says God, the Lord of hosts. This is not only the message of Hanukkah, this is the essence of the Jewish God. We are spiritual warriors. We're not holy warriors. There's no Jewish jihad. There's no crusade for Kabbalah. We're really nice people. We don't ring doorbells. Like Joseph and Matityahu, we look inward and remember our mission. And we take action out of our divine principles. Even in the face of apparently impossible odds, our Jewish principles ultimately do prevail. And if you don't believe me, well, this morning, millions of Jews on this earth and in our homeland recited word for word the same Amidah and the same Ashrei and the same Parshat Vayeshev that Matityahu the priest said 2,177 years ago. That's a miracle. So I'll conclude with this. Nowadays we say there's an app for everything, but there's no app for measuring the human spirit, and our Creator is not scientifically measurable by current technology. So if you're a Hellenist, you're out of luck. Fortunately, Judaism teaches that the divine spark of the human spirit is real. Its origin is real, it's alive, and our spirit is the creation of a sacred and perpetual and ever-renewing source of life. We also know that enriching our spirit adds value and meaning to our lives and the lives of our loved ones and our communities and the nations in which we live. So Hanukkah is a time to recall that a lowly Egyptian slave named Joseph rose to become viceroy of Egypt. And an embattled priest named Matityahu, who had to watch helplessly as they slaughter a pig in the Kadosh Kadoshim, in his beloved temple. He ran away, but eventually he would inspire, in the words of the Megillah, Antiochus, the few and the weak to defeat the forces of the mightiest nation on earth. When one little jug of oil was untouched after the onslaught of an empire, and when one little flame burned not only for 8 days, but for millennia. Tonight we say, Sha'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem. May the one who made miracles for our ancestors in those days continue to make miracles for us and for all time. Amen. Shabbat shalom and happy Hanukkah. Hanukkah Gelt for all.